Since you clicked on this video, I'm going to go out on a limb here and state that you and I both have Ravelry accounts. Whether you use Ravelry a lot or only occasionally, I use it a lot. There's a really good chance that you're not aware of exactly how useful your Ravelry account can be. And I have one particular tip that is going to change how you decide what to knit forever. Follow me into the lounge and let's learn how to make the most of your Ravelry account. Like I said, I use Ravelry a lot. I log into Ravelry every single day. Here are the top 4 reasons why I'm in there every day. Pattern searches, to save and document my projects and whips, to keep track of my yarn stash, aka the yarn bar, to add must knit projects to my queue. Now, of course, there are lots of other things you can do with Ravelry, not the least of which is keeping in touch with knitters like you through features like messages and my group, which I admit I have been neglecting since the Spring Artist Knit Along. And by the way, hot news, I have designed a brand new infinity cowl for a fall knit along coming soon. Sneak peek. But as I started working on this video, I really quickly realized I was not going to be able to put everything into one video without it being way too long. So there's going to be a part 2. In the meantime, we're going to deal with those 4 topics that I talked about just like a minute ago. I'm going to start today with my very best tips for each of these features. The big tip that I lured you into this video for will be last. So if you came in for that and only that, no judgment, much, use the chapters down below and you can skip straight to the pattern search section and get that extra important tip. Still here? Cool. Let's get at it. Let's go log into Ravelry. Here we are on Ravelry's homepage. We're going to start today in the stash section because the other things that I'm going to do will be pulling information from the entries in my stash. So we're going there first. We're going to start by going to my notebook and to stash. I particularly love having all of my yarns in my stash because I always shop from my stash first when I find any of those yummy new patterns, like all the ones from my Wallet Worthy pattern series. I look in my stash first to see if I have that yarn before I go out and buy new yarn. There are many different kinds of filters in the stash area, so I can find exactly what I'm looking for. For instance, one that I use a lot is I will search my stash by weight. So if I've found a pattern that I absolutely love, that's, let's say, calls for sport weight, I can click on the sport weight and it will pull up all of my sport weight yarn. At the moment, it's showing it to me by the date that I've added it. So these are my newest sport weight yarns, but I can change this to most yardage first. If I'm particularly looking for a yarn for a pattern that requires a lot of yardage, I can look in here and it will show me the exact amount of yards I have for each of the yarns in my stash. So I can really quickly narrow down what I might have that's going to work for that particular pattern. But for right now, let's just go back and we're actually going to add something to the stash right now, and then we're going to add it to a project a bit later. So here's how we do that. Over here is a button called Add to Stash. And the yarn I'm going to add to my stash is the kit that I bought to make the maple down vest that you will have seen in Wallet Worthy Patterns July 2024 and in August 2024, where I showed you where I was at with the whip. So first thing I'm going to do is tell Ravelry that I bought this yarn from an online store. The name of the stashed yarn is Rustic Heather Sport. Look, you can see I've added it before because it remembered it and popped up. And the company name is Lichen and Lace. And if I just start typing it in, the autofill will probably find it. So the database has Lichen and Lace in the database, so it found it. I'm going to add that. I can add the store that I bought it from if I want. And in this case, I bought it from Woolly Thistle, so let's just add that and continue. And I'm looking here, yes, this is the yarn that I want to use, so I'm going to choose this yarn. And now we're in to the stash page where I can add further information. The colorway that I'm working with is Sky, so let's add that. I have 4 skeins of that, so let's add that. I bought it from the Woolly Thistle. Let's see if it'll link up the Woolly Thistle here. Yep, it's linked it. The purchase date, I bought it on July 3rd. So I'm going to add that. The total I paid for the yarn itself is $55.75 in US dollars. And I'm going to add a note down here that I also paid, oops, $27.54 US dollars shipping. Just so I have a record that I know when I go to, if I go to order from Woolly Thistle again, how much that shipping charge was. And sometimes if I end up paying extra duties or taxes, by the time it gets here to Canada, I'll add that in here too, just to remind me that sometimes there's a little bit of a tariff, if you will, to ordering things from the US. And while we're in here adding the cost that I paid, or the price that I paid, this is useful for a couple of things. I mean, it's handy to know what I paid. This might make you feel a little queasy, like you don't want to add to your yarn buying guilt. However, if there were any issues, like let's say knock on wood or whatever you want to knock on, or throw salt or whatever it is you do. I'm not particularly superstitious, but I don't want to freak anybody out. But let's say that my house burns down tomorrow and I go to the insurance company and say, hey, wait a minute, I had, X number of dollars of yarn. And they say to me, excuse me? There's a really good chance that would happen. I can open up my Ravelry and go, well, excuse me, look, here's my yarn collection. Here's what I paid for each of these things. Of course, I also have receipts backed up into the cloud for all these things as well. But this is a really quick way to demonstrate what my yarn collection is worth. And also, there is another feature on Ravelry for Stash where you can buy, sell, trade yarn with other Ravelers, and so it's really good for you to have in there what you paid for it, so that when you go to sell it, you can remember what it cost you to begin with. And there's also a box down here where you can note where you keep this yarn stored. So if you keep your yarn in more than one place, so you could say it's in, box 27 or basement closet, or where, oops, basement closet. I just saved that. All right, let's go back, shall we? So if you have a very organized system and you keep your yarns in various places around the house, you're going to want to use this stored in field to enter where that particular yarn is, so you can put it away and then you'll know exactly where to go back and get it later. Okay, so you can see that Ravelry, because it had this yarn linked, automatically filled in the fact that it's sport weight, how many yards or meters, I can convert that to meters if I like, and grams or ounces per skein, and how many skeins I have, the total amount that I have. It all just autofills, which is super helpful. You can also see that I have also some other colorways in this yarn already in my stash, and this is really helpful as well. And then I get the information about the yarn down here. It's 100% wool, how many meters per and grams, projects, how often it's stashed, and I can give it a rating if I like. I'm quite fond of this yarn, so I'm going to give it 5 stars. And the last thing to do before we leave here is we're going to add a photo. So I'm going to choose a file. I have already prepared a photo and put it in a folder. So I'm going to choose files and I'm going to find my photo of Lichen and Lace Sky and click open and upload. And there it is, finished with photos. Save changes. And there we have it. I've entered my Lichen and Lace kit yarn. Oh, that's the other note I meant to make actually. Let's add this note. Purchased as a kit for Maple Down vest. And that's a good note to make just in case you don't get to this. You put it into the stash, but you don't get to knitting it right away or adding it to your queue or your projects. That's a reminder when I go back and look at this yarn that I had already earmarked it for something and I'd bought it for a particular purpose. This note has come in handy for me many times when I've gone back and I thought, oh, I can use that yarn. And I look and go, oh, no, I can't. It's meant for something else. Not that I can't change my mind. And I have. That is my prerogative as a knitter. All right, we'll save changes and we will move on to my queue and put something in the queue. We will find it if we set our sort to date added. There it is, right there, our newly added Lichen and Lace Rustic Heather Sport for the Maple Down vest. If I had entered this yarn as soon as I got it and I was ready to start knitting right away, I could actually use this begin project button and take me directly into adding this as a new project. But we're going to do an interim step instead because I want to show you how to add things to the queue. So we're going to go back to my notebook. We're going to go to the queue. Oh yeah, right. I already put Maple Down in my queue. I got ahead of myself. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at this entry that I already put in my queue. You see that I put it in my queue and I made a note that I had ordered the yarn from Woolly Thistle. Well, the yarn has arrived now. So we can edit this queue entry and I'm going to tell it now that I'm going to use stash yarn, and you'll see this again. We'll enter something different in the queue and we'll see this again. But we're going to use stash yarn. And we're going to tell it we're looking for Lichen and Lace. Search. Here we go. And we're going to find Sky. Now I'm confused. I have Lichen and Lace Sky in there twice and I'm not sure why. Oh, I know why. I think I have one. I have one skein from my Lunenburg pullover project. So we're just going to ignore that. We know that it's this one we just added with the 786 meters. So we're going to use that. And now you see it up here using this yarn, Lichen and Lace, 786 meters in stash. And we're going to scroll down here. We can remove that note because we have received it and save changes. All right, we will come back in a minute when we go to add this to a project and we will take it from the queue and turn it into a project. In the meantime, let's add something new to the queue. So we're going to add to queue, and the project we're going to add to the queue is Hinterstein's Summer Gansey. So let's put Summer Gansey in here, and we're going to click the link, and there it is, Summer Gansey by Hinterstein. So we're going to click that one, and it's come up with the information. This is the yarn that's required, so anywhere from 856 up to 1518 meters, depending on the size, of course. I am going to use stash yarn because I have purchased yarn for this project and I already have put it in my stash. So we're going to use stash yarn, and the yarn that I am looking for is Hempathy. There it is. 980 meters of Hempathy that I put in my stash. We're going to click use. And then we can add some more information down here if we want. We can add tags to make it quicker for you to find this project in your queue if you want to search by tag. I usually don't do that. I try to keep my queue under 2 pages, which means I'm constantly going in and removing things from my queue that have been sitting in there too long that I now think, yeah, I maybe someday might kind of want to knit that. I'm starting to take those out of my queue and just leave in the ones that I know for sure I want to knit and that I probably for the most part already have yarn for or have ordered yarn for. I can enter who I'm going to make this for. I'm going to make it for me. And if I want, I can put a deadline in. So if you have a gift, you're knitting something for a birthday or for Christmas, you can add the deadline to it as well, so that when you go into your queue, you can look down your queue and you're trying to decide what to knit next and see that, I need to have this project done by November 3rd. I better get started on that. And then, of course, you can add any notes. I'm going to add a note that says, from Wallet-Worthy Pattern Video, June 2024, just to remind me that that was one of my wallet-worthy patterns. And save changes. And that added this entry to the end of my queue. So you can see I have 44 items in my queue now. I can move this right up to the top of the queue just by clicking this one button. And now it's number 1. Or I can open the listing of my queue and I can move these entries around and reorder them if I choose to. And that's another thing that I do quite frequently. I'm not going to leave Summer Gansey there because I'm probably not going to get to that Summer Gansey now until we get back to next spring. So I'm going to move it down around here where I have my spring sweaters entered. And then we're going to save changes. Now, while we're still in here, we are going to take this maple down vest queue entry and we're going to turn it into a project. So I can say I'm ready to knit it. I'm going to click Start Project. And it gives me an option to change the name if I want, or I can use the name of the pattern and you can change it later, and then I can click delete this pattern from my queue or leave it in my queue. I don't see any reason to leave it in my queue when I'm moving it into projects, so we're going to leave that box checked and click create this project. And now we are into a project page and we're going to edit because we want to make some changes to this information. So let's start here. Name, Maple Down. Good by me, made for me, size made. The size that I'm knitting is one of the very important things that I like to put into my project area, because when I put a project down, which happens a lot, you may be one of those monogamous knitters who starts a project, knits it to completion, and doesn't cast on anything else while you're knitting that project, and I applaud you, but that is not me and that's never going to be me. So at some point I'm going to put this project down and start something else. When I go back to pick up this project, I want to have all the information that I need so I can remember exactly what I was doing and where I was at. And the size that I'm knitting is a very important component of that. So this particular pattern, I am knitting size 44 inches. It is knitted. I can select the pattern category, which I think just helps other people for doing searches. I'm going to put it in clothing and vest right down there. Tags, also helpful for other people for searching and also for me to help search in my favorites or my patterns. It's vest, it's textured, it is kind of lace, it is in the round, it is bottom up, and then there's some optional ones here I could add, and it is sleeveless, and I'm not really seeing anything else there that is critical. Oops. Oh, I didn't save the tags. Okay, bottom up in the round, lace, textured, vest, sleeveless. Let's put lichen and lace, and we will use these tags. The needle, critical. Put your needle in, because often I will steal the tips off of a project that is languishing to use them for something else. So for this particular project, I am using 3.25s. I'm going to add a second needle, and 3.75s. And sometimes I will enter my gauge, but I generally only do that if I am not knitting to the gauge for the pattern, which does happen occasionally, but in this particular case, I'm knitting to the pattern gauge, so I'm just going to leave it. This is the yarn that I'm knitting with. Right now I have 4 skeins, so for the moment I'm just going to put in that I'm using all 4 skeins. I will update that later when this becomes a finished project, so that I can make a note of exactly how much yarn I used, and any yarn out of those 4 skeins that I didn't use will remain in my stash, and my stash will automatically update to show that X amount of that yarn was used for this project. It's so cool, isn't it? I'm not even to the really good stuff yet. You just wait. All right, let's go back up here. We are in progress. We can tell this whether we're finished or whether it's hibernating, which puts little ZZZs on it, or whether I have frogged it and am reusing that yarn for something else. I can set my happiness rating. So this particular case, so far, I'm very happy with how this vest is coming out. So I'm going to put super happy. Progress. I've almost gone through 2 of those 4 skeins, so I'm going to put myself at about 40%. I did not start it on September 3rd. It thinks I started it on September 3rd because that is today's date, and I just took it out of the queue today and put it into projects, so it auto-populated that date. I started it in August, and I don't remember the exact date that I started it, so I'm just going to put don't know the exact day. And then when I finish it, I can put that date in if I want, or the closest month. I can share my project with any of the groups that I happen to belong to. I'm just not going to do that right this minute. Here's some information about the pattern. 65 other people have knit or are knitting it, and it's sitting at 191 Qs at the moment. I'm really enjoying this pattern, so I'm going to give it a good rating, and I have found the instructions clear. Difficulty, it's really not that difficult, so I'm going to put it as an easy. And I've already entered my yarn information. All right, I think we have covered everything. I can add project notes down here, so I can add that I purchased this kit from Woolly Thistle and am loving how it's knitting up so far. Boy, you wouldn't think typing was my day job, would you? It's really hard to type when people are watching you. And I know that you're not standing here looking over my shoulder, but this is still a lot like being watched while you type. And before we leave, I'm going to add a photo of my work in progress. And here is one saved to that folder, and we'll upload it and say finished with photos. And then the important thing is you want to go in and always save your changes so that you don't lose all that work you just did. And voila, there is the maple down whip. So let's go into my projects section now. We can get there either from my notebook drop down, or we can get there from the file path up here. Go to projects, and now we can see my last finished project was joinery, which I was wearing in the last video. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whips in progress at the moment. And I actually have one more that's not entered here because it's a test knit. So I'm not going to enter it into my Ravelry projects just yet. I really do try to keep my whips up to date in my projects because this helps me when I go in to remind me. And like I said, I go into Ravelry a lot. I'm in my projects and my stash and my queue almost every day, one or the other or all of them. This helps remind me that, oh yeah, I need to get back to that project and finish that off so that I can move it from a whip to a finished project. And I can also see when my whips are starting to get a little bit out of control. But you don't know anything about that, do you? Your whips are always under control. You've always got exactly the number of whips that you want, and you never feel guilty about casting on anything new, ever, right? Let me know down in the comments. I'd like to hear all about it. All right, let's move on to the really big tip. All right, I have brought us back to the Ravelry homepage, and what we are going to do now is search for a pattern. I could do a quick search, but I want to use an advanced search. So what we're going to do is go to the patterns page. And there's all kinds of stuff on the patterns page to help me go down the Ravelry rabbit hole and spend hours on here oohing and aahing over all kinds of fantastic patterns. But we are not going to look at those things today. We're going to go straight into advanced search right here. Now we are in the uber powerful Ravelry search engine. All right, we see here that there are 1,344,410 potential patterns in the Ravelry database. It's going to show me up to 100,000. That is too many patterns to look at, so we are going to narrow it down. We're going to start by selecting only knitting patterns. Now we are down to 786,000 and change. Still way too many. We're going to pick clothing, which narrows us down to 258. We're going to pick sweater, and we're going to pick cardigan. Now we're down to about 63,000 patterns. Getting there. Still too many. And we're going to pretend that we have worsted weight yarn to knit this cardigan, and we're going to select worsted. Now we have narrowed our search down to 9,000 and a bit. Then we can look at this section and pick specifically from maybe patterns that I have in my favorites, patterns that I already have in my library, patterns that I've made, patterns that are in my queue, patterns from my favorite designers that I've added to my favorite section. We will do that in the next video. Patterns that are using yarn that I already have in my stash, but we're running a search for a particular yarn, so we don't need to look at that one right now. I'm not going to select any of these at the moment. We're just going to keep moving down the filters. We can choose patterns that are made from a particular fiber. So if the yarn that we have is something unusual, like maybe it's a tencel, or it's nylon, or it's linen or cotton, we might want to pick from a plant-based fiber versus a wool fiber, just to make sure that we're getting ourselves a little closer to the right style of pattern for our yarn. You can watch my yarn substitution video if you want to learn more about that. I think for the moment we are going to pick wool, and then we can decide on the availability. We can decide if we only want to see free patterns, or patterns we can buy online, ones that are in print, ones that are Ravelry downloads, patterns that are already in my library. And we're probably not going to look at discontinued patterns because that's not helpful. And this is a really interesting section. I like this attributes section because then I can really narrow it down if I'm looking for something specific. I can choose if I want color work. I can choose the kind of construction that I'm interested in. I can pick from a bunch of different design elements, fabric characteristics, There's lots of cool stuff in here. So we could take a quick look at the color work. Intarsia, corrugated ribbing, illusion, mosaic. You know how I love my mosaic. Stranded stripes. But for the sake of this search, let's say that we only have one color of yarn. Design elements. Do I want this pattern to have particular elements? Do I want it to have a collar, certain kinds of edging, a particular kind of neck? Let's say we want our cardigan to have a V-neck. Okay, now we are really getting narrowed down. We're down to 700 patterns. This is getting more and more reasonable all the time. Or I could choose from any one of these other types of attributes down this list. I might want it to have a zipper. If I choose zipper, I'm down to 7. So let's just leave it there for now. We're going for a cardigan with a V-neck. We do want it to have a photo. So yes, now we're down to 666. We can choose age or size. I am going to choose adult because at the moment I'm not interested in looking baby or children's patterns. I'm not too worried about the ease. I'm not too worried about the fit. And I certainly don't care about the gender. This particular pattern could be for women, men, or unisex, or anybody. Doesn't matter. And then we're really getting down into the weeds here, yardage, how much yarn I have. I haven't found this yardage one to be particularly useful, and I'll tell you why. It gives you a range of yards, but the problem is that range covers all the sizes within that pattern. So if you have a limited amount of yarn, it's going to show you patterns that can use that limited amount of yarn, but only in the very smallest sizes potentially. And so I find it not all that helpful if that's what I'm using it for. How many colors you typically use, where it came from, what size needles it's knit on. You see, you could just keep going on and on and on. The difficulty, if it's a Ravelry designer, like there are a lot of filters here, my friend. So let's leave it where we've got it for now and see what we landed on. We've got 555 matches. And now I can change the sort at this point, and I can look for the ones that are hot at the moment. I can look for ones that are new. I can look for the most popular and the most projects. For the purposes of the big tip, we're going to go to most projects. All right. Here we are. Now you're totally going to think that I set this up in advance, and I did not. But wouldn't you know it, the pattern with the most projects in this particular search is a Thea Coleman pattern. And you already know how I feel about Thea Coleman. This Thea Coleman's Dark and Stormy, out of these 555 patterns, is the one with the most projects. Let's go in and take a look. Here is the information on the project page. It has everything that you could possibly want to know, and Thea is particularly good about giving you lots of detail on the project page, which is something I really appreciate. We could scroll down and read through all of this and get all excited about this project, and we can also click on the photos. Did you know that if you open these up, you get bigger pictures? And we can click through them and look at, oh, how cute. That is totally something I would wear. So cute. Lots of pics of the details. It just looks amazing. It's beautifully styled. Here it is. I'm taking you to the tip right now. The one that you came in here for like 20 minutes ago. We have now fallen in love with the fantasy of this beautiful photograph. What we want to know is, how does this pattern knit up in reality, and what does it look like on other shapes of humans? In particular, what does it look like on a human shaped like you? So here's what we're going to do now. We are going to click on this link that says 1907 projects, and we're going to go in and look. And what I want you to do once you're in here is look for a number of things, 2 things in particular. One, I want you to look with a critical eye at the general quality of the finished projects. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the project status, and we're only going to look at the ones that are finished. Now, we're not in here to critique anybody's knitting. What I want to see is, how does this project turn out on an average? I want to see what knitters have done with this particular pattern, and if for the most part they seem to have had a lot of success. The second thing I'm going to keep an eye out for is anybody modeling this pattern who is shaped like me, so I can see if this pattern is going to flatter my body shape. So let's scroll down and take a look. This finished project looks fantastic, and generally speaking, so far, I'm liking what I see. These are all looking really nice. These entries are coming up, by the way, with the most recently finished ones first. So far, I'm really liking what I see here. This looks great. And it appears that it's looking good on everybody who's modeling it. Now, I know what you want me to do is go and find a pattern that looks terrible, a pattern that I can look in the projects and make negative comments. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But I'm going to tell you right now that doing this step and going in and browsing through the projects with a critical eye and looking for any of them that are on a body shape like mine to see how they look has stopped me from knitting many patterns. I have found too many times that I have clicked through to the projects after being taken in by that fantasy photography shot and seen that the sweater looks absolutely nothing like how it looks in that posed photography shot when it's shown on actual real knitters. Am I making sense? Now this one, look at how great this looks on these people. Just amazing. I'm really impressed, as I always am with these patterns. But this is particularly impressive. And no, I did not set this up. And the other thing you're going to want to do while you're in here is read some of the notes, particularly looking for any negative notes, any issues anyone's had with the pattern. Let's search for helpful projects. See this little icon here with the, what do you call those things? The life preserver? You know, the round ones that you throw into the water. This indicates that that person has left notes that someone else found helpful. So I tend to go into those and read them just to see if there's anything I need to know about that pattern before I start knitting it. Another reason to go in and look at the projects is for variations of color and different yarn types that people have used. You might completely change your mind about the yarn that you've chosen. You might completely change your mind about the color you've decided to use. So to sum it up, the big tip that I brought you in here for was to go into the finished projects for that pattern and take a really close look at them. Look at them modeled on someone your shape and size if possible. Look at the general quality of the finished knitted garments. Are the majority of them look like they're a great success and well knit and have good structure? Look at the different yarn types that have been used. Look for the helpful projects with the little life preserver icon on them. Look for all of those things before you decide to knit this pattern. If you still love it, then by all means save it to your favorites. And I can take this particular one and save it right into my Thea Coleman bundle. And eventually I will have all of Thea Coleman's pattern in my Thea Coleman favorites bundle. Well, what do you think? Did you learn anything? Are you already a Ravelry expert and doing all of those things and having great success with your Ravelry account? awesome. Let me know down in the comments if you have any particular tips that I might have missed. And also let me know if there was anything there that was new to you. Let me know if you think that going into the projects and taking a look at them would be helpful for you. It has made a huge difference for my pattern selections, 100%. So if you got some value out of this today, I'm going to do that thing now that I'm supposed to do that I hardly ever do. And I'm going to ask you to boop that like button and maybe subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And don't forget that you can join the After Hours Loungers membership. There's a join button down below near the title of this video, or there's a link in the description box if you happen to be on a tablet or an iPhone. Now, I gotta go because Oscar's scratching at the door. Oscar's scratching at the door because he wants his supper. If you're curious about my stash, go take a look at this video playlist with my stash curation series from earlier this year. And in the meantime, keep those needles clicking. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye from outside the door. And we will see you next time. Bye.